Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today we are here to do the final movie of What If Harry Became Spider-Man. If you haven't already seen the previous parts in this series, please go check them out, as they will be linked in both the description and comments section. It's very important that you're caught up, as this version of the story is way different than the original. But by the end of the video, if you enjoy it, I ask you to like and subscribe to see the series finale soon. And as always, be sure to join my Discord and follow me on Twitter. Links in the description. The movie would begin with Peter watching Spider-Man swing on a TV. He smiles knowing that it was his friend, and this wouldn't be a good moment to show his arrogance. The camera would show him smiling, before cutting to Harry watching his own swinging on TV inside his home. Bernard would bring him brunch, and would say that he had a couple things on his resume for today. He would then walk off, and Harry would call to him and say thanks. Peter would then get the same short scene introducing Gwen Stacy, before cutting back to Harry. We then get a bit of Harry at a meeting, closing off a speech with someone asking him a question about stocks, and he would answer back with a joke. This would make everyone laugh, and he would walk out of the room saying that he'd see them all tomorrow. Then it would transition into Peter buying a ring and going to MJ's play. That scene would be going the same as in canon, only Harry would be watching MJ rather than spying on Peter. The two would then meet up after the show, with Peter saying that he was planning on proposing to MJ. This would stun Harry for a sec, asking Peter if he was serious. His best friend would say yes, and Harry would smile, telling him that it was great. He then told Peter that he had to go, and wished him good luck. The next scene would then go the same, with Peter and MJ talking, and afterward, we would see Harry in the secret lab of Norman Osborn. He would be working on improving his own suit and glider, but wouldn't want it to look too much like the Green Goblin. He would also look at the Goblin Serum, thinking about using it before ultimately putting it back down. Peter and MJ would then be sitting in the grass, looking at the stars. That scene would basically be the same as the original, just minus the webs. As the two ride home, a mysterious glob of black goo would climb onto the scooter. We would then get Flint Marko's introduction, and follow that with Peter telling Aunt May about his plans to propose. Because the fight between Harry and Peter doesn't happen, it would actually be replaced by Harry working on improvements. Bernard would come in, bringing Harry dinner, and reminding him not to spend too much time obsessing over his work. That's what his father did, and he wants to make sure that doesn't happen. Harry would say that he wouldn't, and Bernard would then walk out. Flint Marko would become trapped in the sand, and that goes about the same with him finally becoming Sandman. The scene that follows is Bernard walking into the secret room to give Harry his dessert, finding him asleep on the floor. He then covers Harry in a blanket, before putting dessert in the fridge. After that would be the birth of Sandman, and I know this sounds like we're moving really fast, but that's because A, this movie is fast-paced, and B, the Harry amnesia thing takes up a lot of screen time, so without that happening, it's hard to make extra scenes that would fit within the story. But some smaller scenes I would place, instead of the hospital moments, would be Peter taking some pictures in the city, MJ thinking about Peter, Harry, and her acting role, as well as maybe a new Ditkovich scene with Peter coming home after talking to Aunt May. And after the transformation of Sandman, it would be followed by MJ talking to Peter. She tells him how nobody liked her performance, and he tried his best to comfort her. He would actually be more genuine than in the original though, since he isn't egotistical from all the praise of Spider-Man, since, well, he isn't Spider-Man. The two embrace before hearing the police report, leading to Peter grabbing his camera and telling MJ that he'd see her later. We'd transition into the train accident with Gwen Stacy, and Spider-Man would show up to save her, introducing Eddie Brock. Peter would also be there, and Spider-Man would specifically allow him to take shots of him. Eddie and Peter would then later meet and butt heads about the pictures of Spider-Man, with Eddie getting a job at the Daily Bugle. Peter and Harry have their little hangout, only this time there isn't any amnesia involved, so it would be less focused on Harry's memories. Instead, the two reminisce about their past and what the future has in store for them. Harry would tell Peter that Spider-Man was going to be getting a public celebration for all his hard work, and Peter would of course be happy for him. Harry then goes on about how he found his father's old stuff in an abandoned room, and how he also found the Goblin Serum he had used. Peter asked if he used any of it, but he says no. Harry then begins to talk about his bad experience with love, and Peter would ask him what he means. His friend responds that Peter has a girl that he's about to get engaged with, while he hasn't gotten with anyone since high school. Peter says that it couldn't be too hard, and then tells him that there's a nice girl named Ursula who lives next door to him. He could try to hook them up sometime. Harry would laugh a bit and the two would keep walking, and Peter would then ask, "What about the girl you saved today?" Gwen Stacy. She's the daughter of Captain Stacy. Harry thinks for a sec, and the two would talk a bit about her father. I guess, maybe, but what if she finds out? Peter would say that he's confident he could handle all that somehow. I mean, he kept him in the dark for 2 years. The friends laugh once more, continuing their hangout. MJ then goes to her workplace, where she finds that she has been replaced, and we then get to the celebration, and Peter would be enjoying it along with everyone else before MJ arrives. Once she does though, the two would talk about MJ's replacement, though Peter would try to take her mind off of it while they enjoy her time. Harry would also be sitting atop a building, smiling as he watches everyone celebrate, all for him. However, Sandman would be looming nearby. Harry would see the announcer and would look to see that it was Gwen Stacy. With this, he gets a little nervous, but convinces himself to keep his cool. He is Spider-Man after all. Gwen then calls out Spider-Man, and Harry swings down, accepting the key to the city. However, it doesn't end there. The crowd begins yelling for Gwen to kiss the hero, and Peter, knowing what was about to happen, would laugh a little. Harry would tell Gwen to do it, and she would pull down the mask a bit so the two could kiss. Peter would be hyped about this along with the crowd, and would encourage MJ to smile. Unfortunately, there wouldn't be much to smile about, as the Sandman appears. Spider-Man sees this, and heads off to battle him. The two would have the same scuffle inside the truck, but since he doesn't have access to his glider, Spider-Man would lose. After his defeat, Harry would reflect on the battle, and we see Mary Jane and Peter having their dinner. Peter would be trying to make his advances, and MJ would be enjoying her time with him, though thoughts of her replacement still remained in the back of her head. Gwen Stacy would then walk up, saying how Peter is her lab partner. As she talks, Peter would message Harry, telling him to pull up, as this was his only chance he could really meet Gwen. MJ seeing Gwen talking to Peter, and then him being on his phone, would make her feel worse. She chooses to leave after Gwen walks away, although she apologizes and says they could meet another time. This leaves Peter with the failed plan, and so he takes the ring and returns home. Later that night, Harry would arrive at the restaurant hoping that he wasn't late. He found himself a seat, and Gwen began walking up to him. She asked if he was No, he isn't. She asked if he was Harry Osborn, and he responded that he was. She smiled at him, remarking that she got to see 2 people she recognized in one night. Harry would then ask who the other person was, and she says it was her lab partner, and Harry would ask if it happened to be Peter Parker. Gwen said yes, and he responded that he's actually his best friend. She said that that was cool, and he said that if he knew he would be here, he would have come sooner. Gwen tells Harry that Peter was actually there with his girlfriend, and he would smile, saying, "You know how that stuff is." She would laugh a bit, saying yeah, and she would then say that she had to get back to her family. But Harry would ask if she had any extra room, as he really didn't have anyone to eat with, and he could pay for meals at the end. She said sure, and the two then sat with the rest of Gwen's family. They would have dinner, and Harry would get a chance to learn more about the Stacys and make the best impression he could. The next day, Peter calls MJ and she apologizes, and the two would make plans for a later date. It is then when Captain Stacy would call Peter, telling him to come to the police station. Peter and Aunt May would then learn more about Uncle Ben's death, and that Flint Marko was the true killer. This would reignite past feelings from Peter, because at that point he had moved forward with his life, but knowing that Uncle Ben's killer was the wrong guy, and he was still out there, was simply too much. Of course, Peter wouldn't lash out as much as the original, so when MJ shows up, he explains to her what happened and how he's feeling. She tells him that she's sorry before hugging him, and Peter says that he just needs time alone right now. MJ then leaves, and Peter then goes to sleep. And that is when the symbiote finally does something. But that is where we're going to have to end this part, so if you want to see the next part, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This video has mainly been build up, and the next 2 parts will cover basically the rest and most of the action. But as always, tell me if you liked this part, tell me what you think will happen next, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, have a great day.